How many times have you heard developers say they're trying to recapture the great feeling from games they remember from their childhood? Games from the 80s and 90s looked at through rose-tinted glasses, forgetting all the rage-inducing deaths and frustrating gameplay that you had to endure in between the good bits. And how many times have developers actually managed to recapture that feel-good, rosy-tinted nostalgia without the terrible bits? Not many. But now we can add another game to the list of successes. I'm Andrew, this is Leaps and Bounds, and I'm going to talk about Alwa's Awakening. Game designer Mikael Forslind was playing NES games one evening in the autumn of 2014 when the idea of making his own game came to mind. He hadn't made games before, but started planning anyway, dreaming big. After putting together a 14-page document outlining his ideas, he sent it to pixel artist Alexander Berggren, who liked what he saw. Forslind had soon roped in Robert Kreis as the music artist. They'd both worked together as organisers of Scandinavia's largest retro game convention, Scandinavia's largest retro game convention, RSM. Next step, find a programmer. So Forslind did what anyone would do when trying to find a programmer, send out a tweet. Sat only a few desks away was the apparently extremely handsome Kevin Anderson, and the Elden Pixels team was complete. Elden Pixels say that Alwa's Awakening was inspired by classics such as Solstice and Battle of Olympus, but also modern games like Trine. This modern connection is probably one of the reasons Alwa's Awakening works. It recognises that not everything from the 80s games were fun, and that we've learned a thing or two about game design since then. And everyone on the team seems to not only love retro games, but understand them, where they work well and where they don't. The artwork for Alwa's Awakening is charming and well made. It instantly recaptures the feeling of the NES era and looks good doing it. Each area of the land of Alwa has its own colours, from the cold blue underground chamber to the fiery oranges of Void Tower. Each of those zones has its own chiptune soundtrack too, that I soon found myself humming along to. It's a soundtrack that deserves some attention, and as such, Elden Pixels have put Robert Kreis' work on YouTube for everyone to hear. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can hear it in the background of this video. You play as Zoe, sent from another world to bring peace to the land of Alwa. She controls well, and you have a lot of say over precisely where she lands after each jump. At first, I found the movement a little too slow. I wanted it to be a little pacier, but I soon grew used to it, and it certainly suits the game. It's definitely about the platforming rather than combat. The enemies are usually pretty easy to defeat if you approach them defensively. Zoe is equipped with a magic staff that, in true Metroidvania style, gets new powers and upgrades as you progress, allowing you to reach new areas. This is the only time the slower pace really becomes something of an inconvenience, when I had to backtrack to get to these new areas, and there's a lot of backtracking. It made the process a little long and repetitive. There are lots of secret areas to uncover along the way, but once you've found them and you're literally just trying to get from one point of the map to the other, it did become a little tedious. Similarly, some of the save points are a little too far away from each other with some tough challenges between them. With only 3 hit points and some insta-death pits and spikes, it can make some of these sections difficult, and I found myself repeating some rooms a number of times to get back to where I died. This is great on the one hand, in that similar to old NES games, it's easy to learn but difficult to master, and the more you play the game the more comfortable you are with it. But on the other side, the difficulty spikes in places and it isn't well balanced. Early on, for example, I found the game really easy, but the next moment I'd be dying repeatedly through some brutal section before the next save point. The biggest spike came at the end when I moved on to the final sections. I understand the last section of a game is supposed to be difficult, but the jump was rather jarring. This also carries over to the bosses. Some I defeated first time without any difficulty. The boss of the Shrine of the Sea Monk I defeated almost by accident in under 30 seconds before I'd even had a chance to work out the boss's patterns and moves, and then the boss of the Void Tower took me a lot of attempts. And yet, with all that said, you'll die a lot, but you'll want to try again right away and persist through the challenge. A small thing I'd like to have seen in the game revolves around the magic staff. You have one button to change the power in sequence, so if you're using power 1 and want power 3, you have to hit the button twice, and twice again if you then want power 2. They've probably limited themselves to as few buttons as possible as you'd find on a NES controller, but I'd have liked this split into 2 buttons for easier back and forth switching. Like I said, a small thing. Alwa's Awakening does exactly what it says in the description. It is charming, it is challenging, there is a lot to explore. It does stay as close as possible to the authentic 8-bit look, with sweet pixel art and a soundtrack filled with catchy chiptunes. Don't expect anything new here, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It isn't perfect, there are some cracks, and Elden Pixels have played it safe, but it does deliver exactly what you want from these echoes to retro games, and if that's your sort of thing, you should play this game. I'd like to see where Elden Pixels go with their next title, whether they'll take this save by the numbers approach and build on it, innovate. I hope so, because if Alwa's Awakening is an indicator, that would be a gem.